The Man Who Lived Twice. The astonishing story of Timothy Dexter. If you ever think your life is full of strange twists, let me tell you about a man who might just outdo everyone in American history. His name was Timothy Dexter, and 200 years ago, he somehow became one of the richest men in New England, almost entirely by accident. He made business decisions that should have ruined him, wrote a book that barely made sense, and even hosted his own funeral while he was still alive. Yet somehow, every ridiculous thing he did turned into success. His story is so bizarre that you'll wonder, was he a fool who got lucky, or a genius who hid behind madness? Timothy Dexter was born in 1747 in Malden, Massachusetts, into a poor farming family. He had little education and worked from a young age tanning hides, a smelly, back-breaking job. People who knew him back then said he could barely read or write. But Dexter had one thing most others didn't, an unstoppable belief that he was destined for greatness. As a young man, he decided he was tired of smelling like leather and wanted to become rich. So he moved to Newburyport, a bustling harbor town north of Boston, where merchants traded goods from around the world. The problem? He had no connections, no experience, and almost no education. Still, he married well, a wealthy widow named Elizabeth Frothingham, and used her fortune to begin investing. That's when the strange luck began. Around the time of the American Revolution, the economy was chaotic. Paper money issued by the Continental Congress had lost most of its value. Everyone said it was worthless. But Timothy Dexter, not really understanding finance, bought huge amounts of it, piles of nearly useless notes for pennies on the dollar. His neighbors laughed. They said he was insane. Then something miraculous happened. After the war, the new U.S. government decided to honor those old notes at face value. Overnight, Dexter became wealthy. The man who had been mocked for buying worthless paper was suddenly one of the richest people in town. And that was just the beginning. With his newfound fortune, Dexter decided to become a merchant. Unfortunately, he didn't quite understand trade, but that didn't stop him. In fact, his decisions were so strange that people began to think he was deliberately trying to fail. For example, one time Dexter heard that the American colonies in the Caribbean needed goods. So he sent a shipment of warming pans, metal pans used to heat beds in cold winters, to the tropical West Indies, where it was over 90 degrees year-round. Everyone laughed, predicting disaster. But when the shipment arrived, local sugar plantation owners realized the pans were perfect for boiling molasses. They sold instantly. Dexter made a huge profit. Another time, someone sarcastically told him to ship coal to Newcastle, a British town famous for its massive coal mines, the one place on Earth that absolutely didn't need more coal. Dexter, not realizing it was a joke, did it. When his ship arrived, it turned out the coal miners were on strike, and Newcastle temporarily needed imported coal. He sold everything at a premium. Another fortune. Then came the time he sent wool mittens to the South Pacific, and locals traded them to passing ships bound for Siberia. Again, profit. Every foolish thing he did somehow turned into gold. At this point, people began calling him Lord Timothy Dexter. He wasn't actually a lord. America didn't even have nobility, but Dexter liked the title so much that he started using it. He built an enormous mansion in Newburyport and decorated it with 40 life-size wooden statues, including George Washington, Napoleon Bonaparte, and of course, himself. Across the front gates, he hung a sign that read in bold letters, "I am the first in the East, the first in the West, and the greatest philosopher in the Western world." Neighbors rolled their eyes, but crowds came from miles around just to see his bizarre home. But wealth wasn't enough for Timothy Dexter. He wanted to be famous, so he decided to write a book. The only problem was he could barely write English. Still, in 1802, he published his masterpiece with the incredible title, A Pickle for the Knowing Ones.
The first edition had no punctuation at all, no commas, no periods, no question marks, just words running endlessly together. Here's a taste of what it looked like. Spelling preserved from the original. I'm me the first in the East, the first in the West, and the greatest philosopher in the Western world, and now the greatest writer in the world, and now the greatest fool in the world, for what I have done. Most people says I am no fool, but I am. Readers were baffled. Was it satire? Madness? A secret code? Dexter didn't care. He loved the attention. When readers complained about the lack of punctuation, he released a second edition with an entire page of random punctuation marks at the end, with instructions for readers to pepper and salt them as they please. It was ridiculous, and yet the book sold thousands of copies. In fact, it became so popular that it was reprinted 8 times. Some historians even call it an early example of American absurdist literature, a century before Mark Twain or James Joyce. As Dexter grew older, his behavior became even more eccentric. He wore fancy European clothes, carried gold-headed canes, and gave out coins to children in the street. He loved attention more than anything, and he would do anything to get it. So one day, he came up with his greatest performance of all. He decided to fake his own death. According to local stories, Dexter told his servants to prepare a lavish funeral, complete with a coffin, mourners, and music, so he could watch how people would react. Invitations went out across town, and hundreds came to pay their respects to the departed Lord Timothy Dexter. Dexter hid behind a curtain in his mansion, secretly watching as the mourners cried. He was delighted to see the crowd. But when he noticed that his wife wasn't crying as much as he expected, he stormed out, very much alive, and shouted at her for not being sad enough. The entire town was shocked, but Dexter found it hilarious. He declared himself reborn, a man who lived twice,